the everlasting, leaving on the everlasting arms. Sorry.
You can't read my handwriting. So
The
I can't read it either. It's like a doctor. It's just there for fun.
Mm. 460, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace of mind, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and leaning on the, oh how sweet to leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms, I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms, leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, arms. Please stay put and may Roberto please do the leading prayer.
Dear God, thanks to be here all together to worship and to learn about your holy words. Lord, help us to follow you every time, every day of our life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. May you please go to 378, stand up for Jesus. And we're going to do fellowship. We're going to do fellowship, and at verse 3, we're going to shake hands.
I don't know what's problems today. It's not you, Jerry. All right, 378. Stand up for Jesus.
Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner, it must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead, till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed. Stand up for Jesus. the trumpet call obey. Forth through the mighty conflict, in this his glorious day. He that our men now serve him against unnumbered foes. Let courage rise with danger, and strength to strength oppose.
All right, verse 4.
Jesus, the strife will not be long. This day the noise of battle, the next the victor's song. To him that overcometh, a crown of life shall be. He with the King of glory shall reign eternally.
All right, you go ahead and be seated. See, I tell you, Jared's actually good for stuff sometimes. He made the joke this morning when we were picking who was going to lead what songs that he wanted 2 in this service. So me and Stefania decided, okay, if you want 2, you have to open the service. That was the rule. So, all right, I appreciate you being here. Normally this time I need to run through upcoming service for this week. It should be fairly easy because we have something going on Saturday. So it's a pretty busy day for everybody. I think everybody kind of knows what to expect, but if you don't know, Saturday there won't be a live stream because there's the wedding Saturday, so we'll be busy most everybody for pretty much the whole day, the day before. It's going to be very busy this week. In fact, I'll be very busy this week because I got some stuff I need to do here at the church to get it ready, and then I know a lot of the ladies are going to be busy with decorations and things like that. So Saturday there won't be a live stream. The rest of the week things will be pretty normal. Tuesday we'll do a Bible study. It's Dr. Martin. So Dr. Martin is this Tuesday. So that means I don't have to, you're not listening to me Tuesday. Tuesday at 7, Dr. Martin will be speaking for us. It's the last Tuesday of each month he does that. So I encourage you to be online with us and support that. If you don't know, Dr. Martin is a man who's been in ministry for over 75 years at this point, I think. He's been preaching. So he's been preaching longer than anybody in this room has been alive. So, anyways, Dr. Martin will be speaking for us on Tuesday evening for the live stream. Then on Wednesday night, of course, we have our normal services. I think Jonas volunteered since he's got the wedding this week. You know, since he's getting married, I guess he wants to cook for everybody. So he's cooking Wednesday night. So the meal will be at 6 for anybody who wants to come eat with us. And then the service begins at 7. As always, the first 45 minutes of the service is prayer time. That time's not live streamed. It's only from 7:45 that the live stream begins. So if you want to be a part of the Bible study there in Hebrews, we just finished chapter 1. We're going into chapter 2. So that'll be this Wednesday at 7:45 is when the live stream will start, but the service begins at 7. And if you want to be here for the fellowship time and the meal before, that's at 6. Other than that, the service is pretty straightforward. I guess I can announce usually the last Sunday of each month. I talk about what the theme for next month will be as well. So next month on Sunday morning, the theme we'll be doing for the month is cultivating spiritual cultivating fruitfulness. There we go. I'm getting ready to take add a title last year for one of the things, cultivating spiritual health. But cultivating fruitfulness is taken from 2 Peter chapter 1, wherein he gives us a list of things, and he's telling you to add this to this, and add this to this, and add this to this. And he tells you that if you do this, you will not be barren or unfruitful in the knowledge of God, in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. So that's where, since last year we talked about spiritual fruit in the month of November, I decided to pick a similar theme this year for November for the Sunday morning messages. And we're going to that'll carry over into this service as well, because there's too many things on the list to do it in just Sunday morning. It's enough to fill up both Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon services to preach through that list. So next month we'll get into that. I also mentioned that I have got the Q&As scheduled going forward. So we have a Q&A not this Saturday, but the next one. I think that one is going to be on children. The question is, the two questions would be, should parents make their children go to church, and what should they do when their children go astray? I know Brother Thaddeus Kuntz is joining us for that one, and I have to think who else is joining us that day. But anyways, it's something I'll announce next week. Then I also have a special Q&A coming up later in the month, or I guess maybe, middle of November is when it'll be, like late November, 27th. I have a pastor he used to be a pastor in one of a larger church in Ohio. He's stepped down from that, and now he's working with a missions agency that's involved with planting churches around the world. That I've tried to get him to do something with us for a little while, and finally I got him to agree to do one of those Q&As where I have just one guest and it's more like an interview. So we got that coming up, and then of course we have one in December too, but I'll talk about it when we get closer to them. The one thing I want to throw out there is that I ask on Wednesday night that I'm trying to decide how I want to do some of the things concerning our plans for some of the fellowships we would normally do at the end of the year. Now, some of the services, I don't have a choice. Like the candlelight service, we don't have a Sunday night service anymore, so I have to move that to Wednesday. Some things are just out of my hands. However, one thing I do have a choice on is last year, the lockdowns and stuff forced us to get creative with how we would do our normal Christmas fellowship. Because normally Christmas fellowship is one of the biggest, funnest things we do in a year. But last year we couldn't do a huge thing with a whole lot of people and all of that, especially not at the old building. So we had to come up with a different idea. And so I did the Christmas revival, wherein we still did the games and stuff we would normally do at the Christmas fellowship. I just spread them out across the whole week, and we did one game per night. Actually, we did more games because we did it that way. And by doing it that way, we wind up spending a little bit more time fellowship with the ones who could be there on a regular basis. And we got preachers to connect with us. We set up a projector and had preachers connect from around the world to preach to us. It was a lot of fun, but I don't know if it's preferable to the one night fellowship. So the thing I'm asking for those who've been a part of them to know what the two things are like, to give me their opinion and let me know. Would you prefer to do the week-long thing like we did last year with the revival, or one night fellowship, or a few nights of revival, so that I know what people look for in this season, because I know around Christmas time is busy. So let me know what seems more preferable to you. I'll pray about it and see what the Lord would have us do, and then I'll let you know what the decision is on it. All right, so I'm going to ask Safanya if he will. He's going to come lead you in his favorite hymn, page 447, The Lily of the Valley. Page 447, The Lily of the Valley.
I have found a friend in Jesus, he's everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. The lily of the valley, in him alone I see all I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. In sorrow he's my comfort, in trouble he's my stay. He tells me every care on him to roll. Hallelujah, Hallelujah. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He all my grief has taken and all my sorrows borne. In temptation he's my strong and mighty tower. I have all him forsaken and all my idols torn from my heart, and now he keeps me by his power. Though all the world forsake and Satan tempt me sore, to Jesus I shall safely reach the goal. Hallelujah! He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He will never, never leave me, nor yet forsake me here, while I live by faith and do his blessed will. A wall of fire about me, I've nothing now to fear. With his manna he my hungry soul shall fill. And sweeping up the glory, I'll see his blessed face, where rivers of delight shall ever roll. Hallelujah! He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul.
All right. A couple other things to mention is to remind the kids, which all seem like they're about to be dead, except for Ariana. I don't mean that in a sense like somebody's killing them. They're about to pass out. I don't even know where Josiah is. He's just gone. But anyways, to remind the kids that I started something today, that if the children can tell me, children, not big ones, you're okay. If the children can tell me what I preached on, they don't have to tell me. I don't want to just hear how you preach the Bible, but actually what I preached on, then I will give to the children candy. So if the children want candy, they have to tell me what I preached on today. That's something I'm doing for them. For the adults, I remind you what I told you to do is very simple. Pretty much every outline I ever make has 2 primary points, and then everything else is just breaking down those points. I'm not giving you candy for doing this, but it's for your own benefit, your own spiritual growth, that I encourage you to take and figure out what those 2 points are and make sure you at least take that away from each message. You may not get everything I say. I try to make points that will stick with you and you can take them home with you. But at the very least, make sure you get those central points, those 2 primary things that I speak out as what are the points of the message. Because, and just to explain, like I said this morning, the reason why I'm emphasizing to do that is because so many times somebody will listen to a message, not just here, but anywhere. People will listen to a preacher preach, and then they'll walk away from the message saying that was a good message. I got help from that. But then if you ask them, well, what did he preach on? They don't know. They know that they got help, but they don't know what the preacher preached on. And the reason for that is because we as people tend to remember how somebody makes us feel more than what they actually said. So you remember that you laughed, you remember that you smiled, you remember you had a good time, that something encouraged you a little bit. But the thing that's actually there, that gold nugget that you can take home with you and actually help you, that part gets left behind. So that's why I'm encouraging you to at least get the primary thoughts, those 2 main points. You get more than that, that's fantastic, but at least try to get those 2. All right, so let's go ahead and do trivia then. The children have all taken their places to whoever they're going to try to cheat off of. All right, I actually made a big list of trivia today. It's the most trivia. It's the most trivia of the ones I've done. And I say most trivia because actually the stuff I'm asking are just trivia questions about the Bible for the most part. It's not stuff that's really focused on what I preached this morning. Part of that's because some of it borrows a little bit from the message I'm getting ready to preach, but it's not stuff you had to hear me preach to know it. So the first one is, what does it mean to cleave? What does it mean to cleave to something or someone? Be sure. Yeah, to stick to it. All right, here's where you get to the really trivia stuff. I'm going to be asking the same question over and over again, just different people. Who was the wife of Isaac? Rebecca. Who were the wives of Jacob? Only want one per person. so that you can have the opportunity to get more candy. So don't tell me 2 because you still only get 1 piece if you do that. All right. Rachel and Leah. All right, Rachel and Leah. Who was David's first wife? This is the tricky one because there's more than one answer to wife, but I specify first wife. Yeah, Michal. I've never figured out how the proper way to pronounce this because to me that is spelt in a way that it should be a man's name, but Michal I think is. Who was Abigail's first husband? One of David's other wives. Who was her first husband? Nabal. Who was Bathsheba's first husband? One of David's other wives. Yeah, Uriah the Hittite. All right, and this one's a little more tricky. If you thought Uriah was bad, then you're really in for it. What was the name of Moses' wife? Zipporah, yeah. Who was Rachel and Leah's father? What was his name? This one matters because I'll talk about him in my message. Laban. And who was Rebecca's brother? I'll mention him in my message today too. So she has a very famous brother. Who's her brother? You want to try? No. So he says this Rebecca's brother is Sophia. I think you can figure out pretty quick that he's wrong twice on that.
Remember that it's also Laban.
Yeah, it's also Laban. That's why I did back to back, just to see if anybody would catch that. It's also Laban is the brother. So if you didn't catch that, that means that Jacob did in fact marry 2 of his first cousins. What does it mean? Complete the statement. Therefore, God hath joined together, let no man do what? Michelle. Put asunder. All right, I told you a word to remember in the message this morning. What is the word that means an ability to be teachable? To be teachable. Josiah. Meek. All right. What is the word that means someone who is not teachable? Someone who thinks they know everything, they can't learn.
Right?
It's because of pride, but scorner. Scorner is someone who can't learn. This is actually, these questions are more to do with the morning's message. So, faith cometh, all right, do not get ahead of me. I'm only asking for the next word after I stop saying this. Faith cometh by what? I thought you had the age also.
Listening.
To hearing. Faith comes by hearing. And hearing by, what is Sophia? The Word of God. All right, now complete this statement from Hebrews chapter 2. How shall we escape if we neglect what? So great salvation. All right, that is my questions. I do have a bonus question for you, huh? I have a bonus. All right, and for the bonus, what does the word inspiration mean? I want the actual literal definition, but also want somebody to explain to me what it means when we say the Bible is inspired. Inspired. Michelle. Okay, I'll take that as the definition of what it means. What's the actual definition of the word? Somebody want to jump in and try to help him on that? You want to try to help him?
Inspired.
What is it? What's the most? Give me some kind of literal definition of what the word itself means.
Talk through.
Okay, that's getting closer. Yeah, God breathed was the actual exact phrase, but I was going to take something close to that. All right, so this is yours. Jonas has a collection of those at home anyways. But he can have one from, if JP wants to, you can give him something from the other box. Oh. Or actually, if you don't mind going over, that's what I meant by if you want. You can give, for jumping in and helping, he can have 2 pieces from that box. But as far as what it means in terms of the men that God moved their hearts and told them what to say, that's the answer you need. I was also just looking for that little, some kind of definition of what the word inspiration means. For example, if you want to apply it somewhere else, what does it mean? You have to know how to use the word itself. But, okay, so with that, that's all my trivia. That's everything. I guess I have to preach to you still, but one more song. As she's coming, I want to share something with you. It's going to sound silly, so please don't think wrong with me, because I try very hard not to compare ministries, but I actually had some encouragement this week listening to some online preaching and looking at some other stuff too, because I do a lot of online things. Like we have a lot of different ideas. We tried last night. We did part of a series that's on Bible prophecy I do once a month called Unique Insights in Prophecy. And I start with a question and I end with the opportunity for those who are listening to give a grade as to whether they were convinced by my lesson on it or not. It's just a little idea I had of how to try to make it a little more engaging. We have the Bible challenge, wherein it's a competition between preachers to explain stuff, and they get points for it as a way. The Q&A is really basic in terms of ideas. It's just like a roundtable discussion, but you have the opportunity to ask questions. But to me, I don't feel like I have any truly groundbreaking ideas of the stuff I do. But I was looking this week at some of the biggest Baptist churches across America who have colleges attached to them and have people on staff just for coming up with this kind of stuff. And I was quite pleased to realize that the best ideas they have are stuff that I was doing 2 years ago. They're just now starting it. It makes me feel better because it's hard. And what made me feel good is you have a church that has their membership alone is 6,000 people. They have a lot more than that on Sundays. That they get about as much interaction in the comments on their videos as I do. So I don't feel so bad now when I go over there after the service and I start checking to see who was online and who was participating, and I have just a few comments. I don't feel so bad when we're 1/100th of the size of their church, and they have about the same amount of interaction with people. I'm not saying that in pride. Please don't take it the wrong way. I'm saying that because it was an encouragement to realize that, okay, here we are with much less resource and all these things, and we're still engaging people and getting people involved in a way where I can see fruit from that. I see people, I see the interactivity growing. I see people getting involved in all of that, but with a fraction of the resources. I mean, I was talking to Mike about it. If you watch their videos, they have Hollywood production level cameras stationed around the building. So they're jumping from camera to camera, and it's some really high quality stuff. But in terms of a lot of the work that's done, the ideas are about the same as what I come up with, just here while, by myself, while they have a man that's his full-time job to come up with that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's not to put them down, because they have some really good stuff and they have a better pastor. Their preachers are better preachers than I am. So it was just nice to see that I may feel like I struggle sometimes with some of the online ministries and getting people involved and stuff, but I'm not. If I'm actually doing quite well, I feel like, after looking at what some other people have with that, is what I'm trying to say. So that was a big encouragement this week. I just want to share that with you. All right, page 408, loyalty to Christ. I'm going to leave this one, page 408, loyalty to Christ. From over the hill and plain, there comes a single strain. It's loyalty, loyalty, loyalty to Christ. Its music rolls along, the hills take up the song of loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. On to victory, on to victory. Christ, our great commander, on. We'll move at his command. We'll soon possess the land. Through loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ.
Oh, hear ye brave the sound that moves the earth around. 'Tis loyalty, loyalty, loyalty to Christ. And like and do, bring out the watchword true of loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. On to victory, on to victory, Christ our great commander on. We'll move at his command, we'll soon possess the land. Through loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. Come join our loyal throng, we'll rout the giant Rome. 'Tis loyalty, loyalty, loyalty to Christ. Where Satan's banner's flown, we'll send the bugle notes of loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. On to victory, on to victory, Christ the great commander on. We'll move at his command, we'll soon possess the land. Through loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. The strength of youth we lay at Jesus' feet today. 'Tis loyalty, loyalty, loyalty to Christ. His gospel will proclaim throughout the world's domain. Of loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ. On to victory, on to victory, Christ our great commander on. We'll move at his command, we'll soon possess the land. Through loyalty, loyalty, yes, loyalty to Christ.
All right, I have to correct something I told Savanya before the service. You asked me if that song we sing regular, and I told you we sung it last year. I was thinking, for some reason, when you were asking me about the song, I was thinking of Faith is the Victory. So, yeah, you're better off that you didn't choose to lead that one, because I struggle with that one sometimes. So, in fact, that's actually, if I seem distracted, it's because I started singing. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be singing Faith is the Victory. All right, let me mention just a couple things. One is from the upcoming events that were listed this morning. I want to remind everybody that next Sunday, this service, assuming everything goes well with the baptism, will be moved. It won't be here in the building. We'll be moving to the park just over here around the corner. I forgot to say this morning because I had to change up the schedule of stuff. So if people don't know where it's at, it's you told them. But to get to the park, you just go out the door, you turn right, go to the traffic light, you turn right, walk until you see some trees, turn left, and go inside the park. It's that park. It's really pretty easy to get to. If you go over when other people are going, they can show you an easy way so you don't have to fight through the trees and all that stuff. But people who wait and come later, they always walk through the trees and crazy stuff. There's actually the last road before you get to the park. If you turn on it and then turn right, there's a back entrance to the park right there. So it's really easy to get in and out of. But we'll be doing a baptism over there next Sunday. Both services, Brother Morgan is going to be preaching. So in the morning, he's going to preach. And then when we move this service over there at 2, he'll be preaching in that service as well. So what I always encourage people with the baptism services when we do that is to come to both services. The reason for that is because since we started doing baptisms over there, this year's new. Last year and before, we always did baptisms at Blarmison. You had to move it, and we had to do it on a Saturday. Now, because we can do it somewhere local, we do it on Sunday. That way, it's easier for people to be involved and just easier to organize. But a baptism service is not as long as a normal service. So what I do is I do it as the 2 o'clock service, but it doesn't last, hour, whatever, hour and a half. It's a 30, 45-minute service. So I tell people not to make that their only service. If you're going to come. If you're only going to come to one, to be honest, come at 11, because at least you're going to get more fed at 11 theoretically than at 2, because at 2 is going to be focused more on the baptism. At 11 is a church service where we're trying to feed you and all of that kind of stuff. I ask you to come at 2 if you can, because it'd be good to support those who are getting baptized, and it's a good time to be a part of that. So next week we'll be doing that. This is a little bit different. Normally I start with one person and I announce across a span of a month that we're going to be doing a baptism, and then other people come forward who need to be baptized, and we baptize multiple people. This one is a situation wherein I had a lady who I spoke with on Wednesday night who's been coming to the church for some time, but she usually works on Sundays or has school or work one, or maybe it's school, work for her school. But anyways, we sat down and spoke on Wednesday night about baptism and about salvation and all of those things, and she wants to follow the Lord in baptism. And the longer I wait, the colder it gets. So I decided to go ahead and put it the first Sunday I could, which is not today, obviously, because it would have been really hard for me to have organized and told everybody, to go over there at 2:00 today when we made the decision on Wednesday. But next week. So this coming Sunday, we'll be having the baptism there. If you, by some chance, are watching online or here in person, and you have questions about baptism, please talk with me. There are a few reasons in the Bible why somebody who has, let's say, been baptized would still not biblically have been baptized properly. So, for example, infant baptism is not baptism. Infant baptism is completely against the Bible. Somebody cannot get baptized until they're saved. You get saved, then you make a decision to live for Christ. So someone who was baptized as a baby, that's not baptism. It doesn't matter if when you were 12 years old you confirmed it, it's still not baptism. Baptism takes place after someone has put their faith and trust in Christ. It is them then making a public vow and a decision in their life that they're going to serve Christ. Baptism by sprinkling is not baptism literally by definition. The very definition of the word is to dunk, to submerge underwater. It is the definition in Greek, Hebrew, English, any other language you want to put it in. It's the word. In fact, I joke about this because in English they didn't translate it dunk, because then the Ethiopian eunuch's going to be saying, "What doth hinder me to be dunked?" And that doesn't sound quite as nice as baptized. So they transliterated the word. They made a new word and just trusted people to be smart enough to figure it out. And they made the word baptism from the word baptismo. In Dutch, it sounds like y'all just said, "Okay, dunking's good enough. We'll dunk them." Because what is there's a different word for dunking, right? Don't. But baptism and dunking is about the same word. There's a slight difference, right? Exactly the same? Okay. I thought there was just like a slight difference. Okay, we're getting our Dutch lesson right now. Okay. I just want to make sure I was correct on that, because I was laughing about it the other day that in Dutch, to me, the word is the same word. Like, it just means to dunk. But I wasn't making fun of the Dutch language, so nobody get offended. I was just making fun of the fact that in some languages they didn't do that. In some languages they just said, "Okay, we'll just say dunk. It's good enough." So the very definition of baptism is to dunk. When you study it, when Jesus goes to the water, it says they went down into the water, talking about how they went physically down into it and stood there in the water. When you see why John picked that part of the River Jordan, it says he picked it because there was much water there. It was deep enough to actually go in and put somebody under. The Ethiopian eunuch, it says they come up out of the water. And so far here, I've not really had a problem with this. I think it's more of a problem in some parts of the States. There's a lot of people who sprinkle in baptism. Most anybody here, if you're sprinkling in baptism, you've probably done so as a baby. So I already covered you with the first point. But the fact is, like, if baptism is not done with submersion, then you have broken the whole point of what the picture is. And I always say this, if you don't think pictures matter, ask Moses. Moses hit the rock 2 times and was not allowed to enter into the promised land because the picture mattered to God. God took personal offense at the fact that Moses hit the rock the 2nd time and said you won't be allowed to enter into the promised land because of it. So the pictures do matter when God has one. And the picture of baptism is when you step down into the water, you're identified with the death, burial, going under, and resurrection coming out of it. God even uses that same imagery at other points with the Ark of the Covenant going down into the River Jordan, which is the river of death, and then the river of death being cut off all the way back to the city of Adam. I mean, I don't think there's an accident in those namings and all that. I'm pretty sure God knew exactly what he was doing when he had this thing that represented the throne of God that his glory rests on go down into the river of death. And as soon as it went down in the river of death dried up all the way back to the city of Adam. There's something to be preached there. It's not an accident. So that would be another reason. The Bible does teach to baptize in the name of Father, Son, Holy Ghost. I didn't even know that was an issue or controversy until I came here. And a preacher, or not, I don't know if he's a preacher, he said he was, but some guy got mad at me when I was out giving tracts. It's like, I'm giving tracts on salvation. We're not talking about baptism. But he got mad and started yelling at me and telling me I was Catholic. So I baptized people in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I said, what? He said, nowhere in the Bible does it say to do that. I said, what about when Jesus looked at his disciples and said to go into all the world, baptizing people in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost there at the end of the book of Matthew? And he just got mad and walked away. Really, I mean, it wasn't a conversation. He just got mad and walked away. He didn't want to say nothing else to me. But God does give that command. It does need to be under the authority of a local church. Doesn't mean like the pastor has to do it. That one's a little more complicated to define what that exactly means. But it's not something that you just decide, yeah, I want to baptize somebody. I'm going to go take them and we're going to stick them in the bathtub. We're going to baptize them. It needs to be done with the authority of a local church because it is a church ordinance. It was given to the church to do. And as always, I'm sure there's other notes I could throw in there. If someone who was baptized didn't understand the purpose of it and they thought they were doing this to get saved, that this was a means in which they could go to heaven, that would also not be proper because baptism is you making a decision to walk in the newness of life, to live for Christ. It's not a sacrament that gets you to heaven. So those are some notes I always throw out there when we're getting ready to do a baptism, that if somebody who's watching person or online, whatever, has questions about it, you realize that maybe you've been baptized, but you have one of those issues that you weren't baptized properly, then please talk to me. Give me a chance to show you from the Bible about baptism. I'll sit down and go through the Bible with you about it. Not opinions, not that kind of stuff, just Bible. And we'll go through and explain what it's about. And we'll be happy to talk with you about baptism. So anyways, I encourage anyone who wants to talk with me about that. I do remind everybody that this service next week. So this time today, a week from now, actually by this time today, a week from now, somebody will already be baptized and I'll be over here changing clothes, getting dry, theoretically. So, but make sure when you come to this service next week that you go over there. What I'm going to encourage you to do, it's your choice, is to come at 11, bring a small lunch, a sandwich or something with you, eat a sandwich with somebody, everybody between services. Go to the park if you want to, if it's a nice day. Go over and enjoy. Eat your sandwich over there if it makes you happy. But go over to the park with us and then support those who are being baptized. Like I said, Brother Morgan will be speaking both services, so you don't have to listen to me either way. You're fine. You're free from that. He'll also be speaking the Wednesday night after, I think. He's supposed to be. So that's the big thing I have to talk about. And, of course, with the wedding, the information's been out there. If you're planning on coming by now, you're planning on coming. I mean, it's if you're not planning on coming at this point, you probably just weren't going to come. So we've been talking about it for a while now. All right, let me go ahead and get into the message then. I am going to bypass our text that we've been using for this of Genesis because the only thing I need to say in Genesis is already said in our passage that I want to go to next, which is Matthew 19, wherein he quotes the passage from Genesis. So Matthew 19, if you'll go there with me instead. All right. I think I'm going to have to ditch my jacket. I've been trying to do better about wearing a jacket, but I'm getting too hot for that today. So. All right. Matthew 19. And we're going to start reading in verse number 3. If you don't know, with the wedding coming up this month, we also have another couple who's looking to get married in the very near future as well. I was talking with another couple who wants to get married. In fact, I assume by now they're already married because they were trying to rush things. But I just couldn't do it for them because he's not a believer. So I had to back out of that one. I couldn't help them. But I had 3 different couples I was speaking with about marriage all at one time. So as I was praying about some things, I just decided that I wanted to preach some messages about marriage this month in this service. So if you don't know, that's what we're talking about today. We have already looked at the idea of her being a help that is meet to him. We've looked at the idea of the two becoming one flesh. So we've really talked about the responsibilities of each role in marriage. Today, we're going to talk about lifetime devotion. We're talking about leaving and cleaving. So Matthew 19 and verse number 3. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. They say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away, committeth adultery. His disciples say unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. And he said unto them, all men cannot receive this saying, save they whom it is given. Let's pray. Father, we thank you and praise you, God, for what you do. We pray that you would watch over us, help us just to serve you. I pray that, God, in this time and in this message, you'd speak to hearts. I pray, God, for those who are in marriage to strengthen them, for those who look to ever one day go into marriage to really settle their heart in this and see the commandment that's been given. I pray, Father, that you would help us, Lord, just to be faithful unto you in all things. And we ask it in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Now, since I'm using Matthew 19 as the skeleton for this outline, we're going to build our thoughts out of this. Since in Genesis, the only thing I would be taking away today would be that statement to leave father and mother and cleave to the wife. Since then, I would just be taking that, and that's found here. I chose today to just start in Matthew and stick in Matthew as our text. Because in Matthew, Jesus explains to you a little more about what all that's about. He gives you a deeper understanding. This is Jesus' answer to what marriage was designed for, what divorce is in the eyes of God, when God allows it, and so forth. So just to give you a little bit of context then as to what is going on here is, of course, it tells you that the whole conversation has started because the Pharisees are trying to find a way to trip Jesus up. It's what they do all the time. They're always asking him a question, not because they actually care, but because they're looking for him to say something wrong that they can use against him, which they cannot. They've never found him to be wrong in anything, and they just keep trying and trying, and this is another one of those attempts. And it wasn't just the Pharisees. I mean, you see other people do it. I believe even the Sadducees are the ones who come to him and ask him about the man that was married and he died, and his brother married his wife and he died, and his brother married his wife and he died. So there's 7 of them. And which one's going to be the husband in heaven? And it's like, well, Sadducees don't even believe in the resurrection or any of that kind of stuff. So why would they care about that question? They don't actually care. They're just trying to cause trouble. They're trying to trip him up. And that's exactly what's going on in this passage until he starts speaking. And then when he starts telling them what the Bible stance on this really is, it's convicting to them. And they step back and say, if it's really like that, then you're better off not to even marry. I mean, if that's really what God expects of somebody, then then why should we get married? And that's not just him. His disciples are making that statement at this point. Everybody who's hearing him are stepping back and it's like, we just said this because we wanted to pick a fight with you. If you really believe that, then we're in trouble. And to understand a little bit of what's going on, as you pay attention to the context, as you know a little bit about the law, it becomes quite clear that in their eyes they had gotten to a place where they took in the law where it says if a man finds something of uncleanness in his wife, that he can give her a bill of divorcement and put her away. They took that and took the idea that, if he just doesn't like her, he married her and then realized one day he thought she was ugly. Okay, give her a bill of divorcement. She doesn't cook good. Give her a bill of divorcement. I don't like the way her breath smells in the morning. Give her a bill of divorcement. That's the way they took it to. I mean, that was as you start to notice and look at some of the things that are said, that's where they're going with this. They were getting to a place where anything I don't like, I'll just give a bill of divorcement. And notice that's where this always goes. Whenever you allow a little bit, the world will always take it a step further. People who are always looking for what is the limit instead of what is correct will always take it a step further. And so the limit was, okay, because of the hardness of the heart, I give this one thing and that's it. But for them, it's, you didn't word that enough to make me happy. Now, he explains it in another passage what the actual terms and conditions are. But because they had one passage they could misuse and misapply it, they did. And they ignored the one that actually gave them a fixed rule. And so we'll get to all of that because all of this is what Jesus is talking about. What is the fixed rule? What are all these things? But before we even touch any of that, I want to focus a little bit on this statement of to leave and to cleave. I want to look at this idea of what he says there, again, going back to verse 3 through 5. And verse 5, it says, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. Now, we've already talked about the one flesh. We've talked about the love and the obedience and all that has to come in for that relationship to work. We've explained all of that last week. So if you want to learn about that, you have to go back and listen to last week's message. I can't preach 2 messages over and over again in the same week. So with that said, what you have then is the statement we have to understand. What does it mean that he's to leave father and mother and cleave unto his wife? And it may seem small, but I have known people who sat down and done studies. I've never personally done this particular study, but I have taken notice of this, where they'll go through and they'll look at all the marriages in the Bible that end in divorce, all the marriages that fall apart, the ones that just don't work, or the ones that really, really, really struggle more than what they should. And typically, there are three things that can be noted as the problem. One is adultery, infidelity. It's one of the causes you'll see why people just don't work out. Even today, it's one of the leading causes. The other might surprise you is money tends to be a problem in one degree or another, which also today tends to be true. It hasn't changed since the Bible. The other one, though, is the one you probably don't think of, but God specifically warns it. And that is that they stay too close to family and other connections that come before, and they let those things creep into the marriage and make problems. So that's why there is this commandment to leave father and mother and cleave unto the wife. And if you don't believe that, I can actually show you this one in the Bible more than I can the other ones. I can show you, I think in my opinion, I can show you more often how a marriage ended or failed or whatever because people just stayed too close to family, too close to people who weren't supposed to be in it. Because you have to understand something. When a husband and wife are married together, they're making a commitment not only to themselves but also to God, so that they are entering into a relationship to where the only person who's supposed to be really involved from the outside is God. I mean, that's not to say that people don't have a part in your life. I mean, there's a commandment for the older women to teach the younger women how to love their husbands. So there is a place for people to be involved. There is a place for people to counsel and give wisdom and advice, but there's not a place for them to get into the marriage and make a problem in the marriage. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that a husband's closest connection to him on earth is his wife. His closest connection, period, is God. That God's first and then your wife. Same thing, a wife, God first, then her husband. That's the relationship. It's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be so that as I love God more, it makes me to love my wife more. As I love my wife more, it makes me to love God more. It's supposed to create this triangle of a relationship so that in order to draw closer to one, I have to draw closer to the other as well. That's the way God has designed marriage to function. And when you start adding pieces into your triangle, it's not a triangle anymore. If it has more than three corners or three sides, it's not a triangle anymore. It's basic geometry. Your children learn that before they go to school. So I hope nobody's offended by that statement. But the idea that God has created your marriage so that it's you, him, your spouse. That's it. Nobody else is supposed to have their hands in it. They can give you advice. That's fine. But they're not supposed to get into it and become a problem. It's so simple and so clear. And yet so many people struggle in their marriage just because they get married. They move, a few meters down the road, maybe a few kilometers at the most from their parents. And then every problem they have, whoever's parents are closest, one will run to their mommy and daddy and tell them about what she did. You can't believe she did this to me and she said that to me. And you will never believe, she didn't have my food ready when I come home today. And all these things. And then the other one will call their parents, and you won't believe, I got up this morning and he left his clothes all over everywhere. He left a mess and all these things. You see that. But God specifically is telling you not to do this. He's specifically telling you that in a marriage you are failing if you get to in a habit of doing this, of bringing other people in. Now, my wife has it easy because her in-laws live across the ocean and I don't call people. So she doesn't have to worry about either one. I'm not walking to their house to say anything to them, and I'm not calling them to say anything to them. It's just whatever it is, that's what it is. They call me from time to time. They send me messages, but I'm a terrible son, and I do not do a good job calling or contacting my parents. So in this one place, it's actually a good thing. There's no interference. Now, we, on the other hand, had some of her family live in our house at one time. All of her family lives close by. So for her, it's a little more of a challenge. She has to be the one to fight to make sure she doesn't bring them into the marriage. She has to be the one to fight to make sure that her loyalties are first to me and not to them, that her connection is first to me and not to them. So for me, I have to be honest with you. I don't know as much of what that feels like because I was always independent from the time I was a child. That's just who I was. I was the one who leaned very heavily on my family for stuff. If I needed help moving stuff, okay, I'll call my brother. But in general, I did things myself. That's just the way I am. So I'm going to admit that in terms of the challenge I'm preaching to you about, it's not something that I've ever really had to struggle with because it's just the way I'm geared. It's the way I'm made, that I don't feel a need to go back to my family. Now, where I have a problem is sometimes I have a problem with bringing her family into it by telling her family about what she does. That's the one I struggle with. But her, on the other hand, she has to worry about bringing her family into this. Because when you get married, you are bringing yourself into it, but you have to empty yourself of as much baggage as you can if you want it to succeed. Stefania, I'll use as my example. She was talking about the rule that they had when they got married, that if they had stuff that they hadn't used it in a year, they had to throw it away. If it was stuff that wasn't sentimental, wasn't the kind of stuff that's supposed to sit over there and not be touched, any of the other kind of stuff, if you had like a junk drawer that hadn't been used in a year, they threw it away. The same idea almost you have to apply when you're getting married to almost anything. Is those friends that you used to go hang out with, well, now you're supposed to be cleaving to your wife, so you don't have time to do that so much. It's not to say you can't ever have a friend again, but your priority needs to be focusing your time on her. Calling your mom to complain every time somebody upsets you. Now you have to talk to your husband when you have a problem. You can't just call your mom and cry about it. You have to make the connection between husband and wife. You can't always be going to the outside trying to do that. And I have examples for you in the Bible of what I'm talking about. But one of the verses that stood out to me in preparation for this is actually Psalm 45, verses 10 and 11, where in Psalm 45, God is talking about the bride of Christ. He's talking about the church, and yet he tells her to forget your father's house. He's talking to the bride of Christ and saying, you're going to serve me, forget your father's house. And that should sound familiar to you because he makes a statement over in the book of Luke that sounds a lot like that. He says, if any man's going to follow me, and he's not going to hate father, mother, sister, brother, all these connections, husband and wife even, he says, then he's not fit to be my disciple. And he gives several actual places throughout the Bible where he says similar things. The man who wants to go bury his father, he tells him, let the dead bury the dead. The one who's bought a piece of land and has to prove it, don't worry about that. You leave it alone. All these kind of things. But each time he's telling them that if you have to really do this, you're not fit to follow me. And we've went through those things and we've explained what they're about, that he's telling you to put him before those connections. Like, it's not wrong to go to a father's funeral, but he's telling the one who says that look, if following me means you have to miss your father's funeral, then would you do it? And if not, then you're not fit to be my disciple. It's the kind of thing that if I have a choice, let me use myself as an example. If I'm at a crossroads, because I'm the most likely person I know in this room to face that, wherein something was to happen to my dad, and he's about to be buried, but I'm a missionary in Belgium, and I can't go back to America because I have a ministry here that I can't step away from, and I have to make a choice. Am I going to abandon my work that God's given me to do, or am I going to go back and be with my family? I have to make a decision. Would I choose God if that's what he wants me to do? Now, many times God will provide a way. He'll give somebody who can take place because God's not against you being at your family's funeral. But I have to make a decision. Is he really first in my life? Would I really say, okay, I would skip this other thing in order to serve him? Would he really be the priority in all matters? The same with the man who says he wants to follow him, and he looks at him and says, the fox has a den and the birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place wherein to lay his head. And the guy walks away because, okay, I thought serving Jesus was going to make my life comfortable. If it's not comfortable, if it's not these things, is it still worth going after him and serving him in your life? Do you still feel that way? The same thing, in all honesty, he's making the application here himself. I don't have to stretch this. When he tells you that the bride of Christ is expected when coming to him to forget her father's house, he's making the application for you. That when you go into marriage, preach to the one who's here getting married. If he's going into marriage and he's going to marry the woman who he's supposed to marry, he's got just a few days to make that decision. Then if he's going to do that, he has to ask himself the question, can I hate, meaning to put lower on the list of love, not to actually hate like I want damage to happen to them. You understand that love and hate work on a spectrum in the Bible, so that as you go up, you love more. As you go down, it becomes more hate. It's like the charts where you have +1, +2, -1, -2. It's like that. If you go in the minus, it's hate. If you go in the plus, it's love. The Bible explains itself that way. It's not hard. So he has to ask himself the question, if he's going to say I do, if he's going to marry her, can he honestly say that I hate everyone else compared to her? It sounds terrible when you say it that way, but that is the question being presented. Can he say that if I have to choose whether I hate my dad, whether I hate my family, whether I hate all these things, he has to make that decision, that I am willing to put her as the absolute highest priority behind God. The only one who gets the first rank before her is God. After that, she's next. My work, I hate it. Whatever else, I hate it. She comes first. You have to make that decision. And God's putting a situation where if you can't say that, then same as he tells the believers or those people who say they want to follow him, you're not fit to follow me, then he would say the same thing about marriage, because he's giving you the application there. Because the same thing he's asking a bride to do, to forget her father's house, is the same thing he's saying when, if you hate not father, mother, sister, brother, so and so and so and so, you're not fit to be my disciple. It's the same mentality, the same idea. It's the same expectation in both of those verses. There's someone who's going to make that level of commitment, someone who is going to come to Christ and say, you are my God and you alone, and I'll have no other gods before you. Or someone who's going to come to a wife and say, you are my one and only, I'll have no other loves before you. Someone who's going to come to a husband and say, you are my one and only, I commit my life to you, and I know I'll have no other husband before you. Someone who's going to come and do that, they have to be able to say in their own heart that anything else I hate it. Anything else, it's less. Doesn't mean you despise it and want it to be damaged. I'm not saying you want them to be destroyed. I'm not telling you to want your family to suffer or anything like that. I'm saying that you make that decision. My wife had to do that. Again, I'm a poor example because I'm a terrible son. But my wife, on the other hand, she had to do that because she's very close, always spends time with her family, has never really been that far apart from them other than when she first moved here. And even then, they were very close and very connected. So for her to make a decision to commit her life to then follow me as a husband, she really had to step back and ask the question, can I say I'm willing to hate everybody else? Can I say I'm willing to put them lower on my list of how much I love them? Up to this point, I guess Joe is her favorite. I don't know. She won't say in the service. Definitely not Aura. But am I going to bump Joe out of first place? Am I going to bump my mom out of first place? Whichever one it is, one of those two. But am I going to bump them out of first place so that Junior can be first place? That's what he's saying. If you can't bump everybody else out of first place to follow Christ, then you're not fit to be his disciple. If you can't bump everybody else out of first place, or let's say second place, since Christ should have first. If you're not going to bump everybody down a number to make room for that spouse, you got no business marrying them. That's what he's talking about here. That's the mentality. That's what he's presenting to you. And it's desperately important because as you look at the examples, if you don't do that, you are cursing your marriage. You're putting your marriage in a place where you are dooming it to fail. You're making problems for yourself that should never have to exist. The reason I ask you in the trivia about certain couples, and who is this one's wife, who is this one's husband, is I want you to think about some things, how some of these marriages got in trouble. I brought up David. In fact, David had multiple wives, so his commitment was spread places it was never supposed to be. Because you can't have 3 one and onlys. You can't have 4 or 5 one and onlys. You can't be like Solomon and have 900 plus one and onlys. There is a one and only. Jesus explains that to you when he says, no man can serve 2 masters. He'll love one, he'll hate the other. One will go higher, one will go lower. One of them is going to be the priority, the other one will not. So what's being presented to you when you look at these examples of David, what damage did it do to his home? Actually, let me start before David messed up his own home. Why did David's first marriage end? Now, I understand he went and stole her back, but in reality, his stealing her back was another violation of a whole other law. Because if you're separated from somebody, they remarry, you're forbidden to marry them again, according to the Mosaic law. So he broke a whole other law when he went and stole her from her other husband. But think about her first marriage and his first marriage to Michael, however you want to pronounce it. Think about it and ask yourself the question, why did it end? What happened? Because she loved him. I mean, she really, really loved David. She was crazy about him. So what happened? What went wrong? Well, the marriage broke because her daddy would not get out of the way. Not only did her daddy chase David off and try to kill him, but her daddy took her and forced her to marry somebody else. Now, the problem is, over time, she fell in love with that man. She actually grew to resent David. And then when David stole her away from him, she really hated him. And that's why you see later in his life when he's having his big parade bringing in the ark, she hates him during that time. Is because David, stole her away from the man that she grew to love after he abandoned. Because you understand, he went off and left. He abandoned her. Whatever his logic was, whether he wanted her to be safe or whatever, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he abandoned her. But it was all about her family. If he wasn't living in Saul's house, he probably would have never had to have left her. If he wasn't right there, he probably could have been a little safer. But the biggest thing was at the end of the day, because he left her there in her father's house instead of leaving father and mother, cleaving to one another, because he left her in this situation, her dad took her and married her to another man. He just pretended like David's marriage didn't exist and it was over with. So David's first marriage broke because family could not get out of the way. What happened beyond that? Well, David decided to not have a one and only, but several and onlys. He decided to marry every woman that he ever met that he thought was really pretty. So, of course, we know Bathsheba, we know Abigail, we know that David had a problem. But because of David's problem, especially in regards to Bathsheba, God told him the sword would never depart from his house. And almost every problem that David had from that point on, from the rape of Tamar to the death of Amnon to the death of Absalom, losing his kingdom, all that kind of stuff, even the fighting between Solomon and the other son who wanted to be the king, all of that all comes down to David not taking his marriage seriously and not putting his wife as the closest relationship he had on earth, by being willing to bring other wives into his marriage, by being willing to bring other people in when it's supposed to be you, your spouse, God. That's all it's supposed to be, but he complicated it. He made it where it's no longer a triangle, it's something more. And because of that, he brought in problems in his family, so that one family didn't view the other one as family, so that they fought, so that they killed one another, so that you have all these terrible stories because David messed up the relationship. He made it something God did not make it to be. And if anything, he learned it from his father-in-law, because his father-in-law had already done that to him when he took Michal away and married her to another man. So understanding these things, you see the example of David, you see that. I think of, and this is almost in the opposite direction, I think of Isaac and Rebekah, that you have a situation with her that her first loyalty wasn't to her husband, it was to her son. They each had a favorite son. They had twins. He very clearly loved Esau. You don't have to read the story very deep to figure out that Esau was his favorite. You don't have to read the story very far to find out that Jacob was her favorite, that she loved Jacob, and she wanted Jacob to be the number one son, and she sacrificed her relationship to Isaac, whatever, in order to make that work. In order to put Jacob above Esau, she sacrificed her relationship to her own husband. And in him, his relationship to her was already damaged. I don't really see as much on his part as I do hers, but the fact that this woman, and hers is even more incredible when you think about this, she was a woman who abandoned everything to marry him. When you think about this for a moment, in order to marry Isaac, a guy shows up at her door who says he's the servant of Abraham and tells her that I've got this really handsome, nice young man you can come marry if you want to come with me. And her family looks at her and says, you want to go with this guy? She says, yes. And she leaves everything, literally abandons her entire family, goes off with some stranger to go marry a man she's never seen before. So you talk about somebody who's willing to leave father and mother and forget their father's house. I mean, she's one of the best examples you'll ever find of that. But then after that, you see she does the opposite. She lets another connection come in and become more important to her than the connection to her spouse. She lets her love of her children come in, her child very specifically, to come in and make a wedge between her and her spouse. The relationship of a husband and wife has to be one of clinging to one another. That's what it means to cleave. That's why when we talk about the priest not wearing things that would make them sweat unless the clothing would cleave to their thighs. Talking about how when you sweat, how the clothes stick to you and it becomes hard to pull it off. The idea of the word asunder, when he says, let no man put asunder, that means to cut it in half, to cut it in pieces. The terminology and everything God is using is very much linked to that idea of being one flesh. He's saying it's designed so that the marital relationship should be that you cling to one another like how your clothes cling to you when you just got rained on all day. How your clothes cling to you when you're soaking wet and it's hard to pull them off. It takes energy just to get them off of you because they're stuck to your skin. That's what he's saying a relationship of a husband and wife should be like. And anytime anyone, whether it's parents, children, friends, whatever, comes in between that, your marriage is out of the will of God because you've let somebody come in who's not supposed to be a part of it, who's not supposed to be a problem in that marriage. But I've given you these. I've still not got to my best example. I'll give you one before I get to that one, though. And that's Zipporah. That's why I brought her up. I think about Zipporah, and Zipporah had a problem that made her marriage to Moses hard and got to the point where Moses almost died because of her problems. And that's that she could not let go of her traditions. She couldn't understand why somebody would circumcise their child. She made a commitment. She made a promise that she was going to follow him, that she was going to marry him and she was going to cling to him and she was going to leave her father's house and go with him and all those kind of things. She made those commitments. And then when he says, okay, we're going to circumcise our son, she calls him a bloody man. She throws a tantrum. She hates him. She just wants nothing to do with him because she could not let go of her culture and her custom and her traditions in order to cleave to him first and foremost. And he almost died because of that. God got so upset with him about preaching to everybody else to circumcise your son and then thinking he doesn't have to circumcise his own, that God almost killed him over it. So you have in this situation multiple stories. Somebody who let their child come in the way, someone who let their custom and cultures and traditions come in the way, people who let other wives come in and other relationships and things like that come in the way. But you see all the time when people from outside the marriage get involved and have far more input and far more say and are far more involved than they are supposed to be, it damages and many times destroys the marriage. So you see with Moses and Zipporah, the fact that she couldn't let go of that. And I can say, I mean, this is something I can testify to, is that as an American, I'm probably the least American person you've ever met who's actually American, who other than my accent. That's the most American thing about me is my accent. You can say I look or whatever, but the fact that I get told all the time I look like I belong to the family of Stefania and now apparently JP because we're all look alike is what we're told by little boy. So I don't know how much that counts. But the fact that my family is from this part of the world in the first place, the fact that let me grow my beard a little bit and my hair a little bit, and I'll go over to Ireland and I'll fit in with all the street thugs over there, no problem. That's where my family's from anyways, especially Wales. Wales is where I'll do it. But the point is, none of those things really make me so uniquely American. My accent is the most American thing, but I'm not somebody who really clings to my culture and my custom, my traditions. In fact, I'm somebody who questions all the time, why do we do this? Why do we do this? And if there's not a good reason, I don't want to. My wife, on the other hand, not to pick on her, she had a harder time when we first got married, letting go of some things that just because you did it this way in Romania doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And we struggled with that some in the early part of our marriage because she had this expectation that this is the right way. You have to do it this way. It's how we do it in Romania. And we fought about that a few times. Language we fought about. In fact, if somebody ever married someone who you're both maybe speak English, but it's not either of your first language, then I very much talk to you about this. I really want to make sure you understand what I'm getting ready to say. Be very understanding and merciful, because half the things you think you're arguing about, you actually are not arguing. You think you're arguing about something, but it's just that you don't actually understand the other person. And since the majority of people who are married in this room are married to someone who was either completely from another culture or raised in another culture, I think you all will agree with me in some degree of this. That my wife and I've explained this, used the example many times. We both tell each other to leave it. When I would tell her to leave me alone, I meant, I'm busy right now. I don't want to think about this. It's bothering me, whatever, but just leave me alone with it. We'll talk about it later. When she would say it in Romanian, I took that to mean that what I was saying was not important, to get over it, stop being a baby, whatever. So for her, she took it as I was saying, I don't love you anymore. Go away. I never want to see you again. And I'm just saying, leave me alone for a minute. Let me think about this. For her, she's telling me, it's okay. You don't have to worry about that right now. And I'm taking it as her telling me my opinion doesn't matter and that I'm not important and all those things. So you see, we're arguing about something, and neither one of us are saying what the other person is accusing them of. Neither person means at all what's being said, because you bring so much baggage to a marriage that you can't escape of. I cannot completely reprogram a language my wife spent her entire lifetime learning in just a few years of marriage. For the rest of her life, we will find things that we're realizing, you meant something else when you said that, because that's something you can't change. But some of your traditions and your idea that, we do it here, so it has to be done that way everywhere, that can be let go of. Some of the things you brought with you that you're just used to, it has to be this way, so it has to be this way. You can let go of some of that. You can change some things. You can be better if you would actually let go of some of those things. I know myself, there is a lot of places where I can be a better man by learning some things from my wife, because I don't have to do it that way just because that's how I've always done it. There are some places that I can be better. And there's some places that she can be better by learning from me if she'll realize she just has to let go of some of those traditions that she might hold to. Because these things make problems in a marriage. Now, I told you I keep saving the better example. The better example is Laban. Laban, one of the more interesting stories you'll read in Genesis, but most people don't even think about it, is the life of Jacob. And especially when you get to his relationship with Laban, with his father-in-law. Laban, most of you know the first place where Laban really messed him up. And that's the place where he comes in and he falls in love with Rachel, and he says, I'll work, whatever you want, 7 years, whatever you ask to marry her. And so he works 7 years. Laban gets him drunk, makes him marry the other daughter, and then tells him, okay, if you want that one too, you have to work another 7 years. So he's already ruined Jacob's life. Jacob's already done a pretty good job ruining his own life before this point. But now whatever chances he had of having a normal marriage and normal life, Laban's ruined it. So he takes him up on it. He moves on. But most people don't realize the story doesn't stop there. Laban still keeps messing with him. Laban keeps him there, living in his house, working with him. The chapter I would recommend if you want to read is Genesis 30 and 31. But you go into this story and you have this man who Jacob's is living with him because Jacob's messed up his life. He doesn't really have anywhere else to go. He doesn't have anybody else really to turn to. But God's blessing Jacob simply because God's trying to draw Jacob back and use him. He's trying to get his heart because he wants to use him because he's part of the promise that was made to Abraham. So he's trying to get him to do it the right way instead of having to come in and shrink the muscle in his thigh and beat him up to get him to do it. He's trying to do it with mercy and compassion first. So God blesses Jacob. And while Jacob's there with Laban, you always have the problem that his relationship with Rachel and even with Leah, even though she was always, to him the less desirable of the two, his relationship can never really grow or become like a marriage because everything he does, her brothers are complaining about it. Everything he does, her father's complaining about it. And finally, one day, he gets tired of it, says, "It's enough, I'm leaving." And Laban tells him, no, God's blessing me because you're here. You can't leave me. I need you. If you just stick around, God's going to keep blessing me. And if you know the story, it's where they're trying to agree on what his salary is going to be. And so the deal is that, all the babies that are born speckled, the baby goats or whatever, cows that are born speckled, those are mine. And he says, "Oh, that's fine." And then all the babies are born like that. So Laban gets mad and he changes the deal. So it's all the ones that are ringed. So then all the babies are born that way, that kind of thing. And so that finally, in order to escape from this really abusive relationship he's in with his father-in-law, he just has to pack his stuff up and leave one night. He has to run away and hope that he doesn't get into a real fight over this, that he doesn't get considered to be a criminal and a thief. He has to risk a lot of damage to his home and his family in order to get out of this. Now, thankfully, God does something in Laban's heart and it becomes okay and they go. But you see, he spent the first 14 years of trying to build a marriage, trying to get married and then build a marriage underneath somebody who was causing him trouble. And then for so many years after that, he spends it underneath this man who's nothing but trouble to him. And it gets to a place where you look at his family is really messed up. I mean, the reason why he has children with women other than his wives is because of the competitiveness that was brought into it by having two wives in the first place, because he would have been happy just with Rachel. It would have been enough for him. If he just had her, that would have been all he would have ever wanted. But because of his father-in-law, now he's got this problem. Because of the competitiveness between the two wives, now he's got this problem. He needs to go back and get things right with his family and be there, to fix problems with his family and maybe even see his mom one last time before she's gone. But he can't do any of that because of the fact that he's got this father-in-law who controls his life. And I'm not even allowed to pack up my family and go on vacation because my father-in-law doesn't approve of it. And how many people do you know who are in a marriage like that, where if we go on vacation, I gotta talk to his parents, her parents, and make sure it's okay with them. I have to almost get permission just to wash the clothes because the mom doesn't like the way I wash my clothes. Everything I do, she's critical of it. She doesn't like it. Everything I do, her dad makes fun of it. Oh, I could fix it better than that. A real man knows how to do this. You live under that kind of thing, and it puts you in a situation where your first priority is supposed to be to your wife after God, and you're constantly living under the burden and stress of. And I will give my in-laws this. My wife can say this really good about hers because they can't complain. They're never here. She's had my mom in her house, and that's it. But I'll give this. My in-laws have literally lived with me, and I've never really had much problem with them with what I'm getting ready to talk about. But I know so many people who their marriage is damaged. It hurts their relationship to their spouse because to one degree or another, you're always going to hold your spouse responsible for what their parents and their brothers and sisters and so forth are saying to you because it's their family. You only put up with this person because it's their family. You only have them in your house or spend time around them because it's their family. So to some degree, you're always going to feel like it's their fault when they say something awful to you or do something awful to you. It's just the way it is. Now, how many people do you know, and some of you, maybe this is your situation. I just don't necessarily know that. But how many people do you know that one of the biggest problems in their marriage is that every time they hear an in-law is coming or some friend of their spouse is coming, not even necessarily family, but friends or somebody, it drives them, it grieves them, it hurts them to their core. Yeah, I understand that you can't just pretend like your parents don't exist anymore. I understand these things. But let me ask you a question. If anybody else spoke to your wife that way, would you put up with it? If anybody else spoke to your husband that way, would you put up with it? So why do you have friends that you let do it? Why do you have family that you let do it? Why do you let anybody step on that one who's supposed to be most precious in your life? Why does anybody have the authority to? I don't even let my wife's own family bite her. Her sisters, I let get by with a little more because they're women. But when her brothers have come and ever said anything rude or aggressive or tried to yell at her in any way, you better believe Eddie, I just about wrung his neck for him because he yelled at her one time and then thought he was going to run out in the door. So I called him in the middle of the street and yelled at him. And he got so embarrassed he went and hid in his room again. But I won't even let her own brothers talk to her in a way that's rude or aggressive or anything. Why would I let my family do it? Is it because we sometimes regard our family too high? We haven't loved them less like we're supposed to. We haven't truly cleaved to the spouse the way we're supposed to. Because my wife should be that of anyone in this earth, other than my God, she's the most precious person in the world to me. My children, I don't let them talk to her. I'm not like that. I don't let them talk to her and say mean things to her. I don't let them be rude to her. I don't let them talk down to her or say anything. I don't care if it's their mama or not. She's my wife. Before she's anybody else's anything, she is my wife. Before she is her mother's daughter, she is my wife, because God said that is the most close relationship on this earth. And I don't care that she come from her womb. I don't care that she has her blood. I don't care that she acts like her, any of that kind of stuff. It does not matter. Her closest relationship on this earth is that she's my wife. And anyone who says anything to disrespect her or hurt her or do anything to harm her in any way is attacking me personally. You can attack my mom without it being a personal attack on me. I might get a little bit upset. I've called one of my cousins and let him have it because he called my mom cussing her out one time. But it's a lot different than when he's attacking her, saying something rude to her, and when he's attacking my wife or saying something to my wife. There's a difference. Like, I may stick up for my mom. I'll defend my mom. I love my mama. But I can tell you something. I don't have to argue with my wife every time she says something about my mom. And I'm sure not going to let my mom say anything against her. You want to see me how quick I'll try to honor my mom. I'll try to be respectful for how quick I can sever that relationship. You let her say something to my wife or hurt my wife in some way because she's my priority. If that's not true, then if you're not married, you got no business getting there. If you are married, then you better make sure that that's something you can say. And if it's not, then you need to leave and you need to cleave. You need to dump some relationships. You need to dump some baggage, whatever it is that's hindering your relationship because it's getting between you and your wife. Because God designed a marriage so that two become together and they become one flesh. Now, here's the thing. This is where it's going to be a little bit different. When I say I become one flesh, here's the thing. If you want to punch me, I don't really care. Like, if you want to say bad stuff about me, you want to hit me, I don't really care. I'm a man. I can take it. But there are some things that are more sensitive about your body you defend. And as a man, there's certain places in my body I'm going to defend. There's certain things I expect my child if they hit me there. I protect my face if I see somebody about to hit my face. There are some parts that are more comely, that are more sensitive, that you protect. There's things that are just that way. Either you protect it because of the beauty or the sensitivity that's involved. God said that a man is supposed to give honor to his wife as unto a weaker vessel. And that means that for my wife, because she's the closest one to me, because I'm supposed to love her with the love wherein I'm willing to sacrifice myself the way that Christ sacrificed himself for his church, then that means that when it comes to her, I'm supposed to be willing to protect her. And that means protecting her from my family. That means protecting her from things, suffering and things that I can protect her from. But I'm supposed to be willing. Same way that if you're in a boxing match, you just go ahead and accept that they're going to punch you in the arms and in the shoulder and in the chest. That's part of the deal. You let them wear themselves out until you can punch them in the face. It's normal. If you don't know how to box, come on afterwards. Somebody will show you how. We'll teach you. I can know how to do it. But no, when it comes to boxing, you accept that there's some parts of you that just aren't worth trying to protect. In fact, you use them to protect the more sensitive parts of you. Just part of how you do that. And as a man, your job is sacrifice yourself. That's why you work to provide for your family. That's why you do certain things. That's why you don't send your wife down when you hear somebody intruding in your house in the middle of the night to defend the home. It's why you are the one who takes care of these things. Is because as a man, you have a responsibility. And I'm speaking to the men above the women in this because women, you have a responsibility like unto I'd compare the Song of Solomon when she essentially tells all the other women to be quiet because my husband's trying to sleep. My wife, I consider her responsibility to protect me to be this, that she knows I work, that I provide for our family, that sometimes I just need a moment of rest, I need a moment of peace, and she's willing to sacrifice a little bit to give me that. If that means next time when her family's over and I go to bed early to tell them to be quiet because you're waking him up upstairs because it's happened a few times, if that's what that means, then that's her responsibility to protect me. My responsibility to protect her, though, is it doesn't matter if it's my own brother, it doesn't matter who it is. I'm not going to let anybody mess with her. I'm not going to let them attack her, say bad things about her, any of that kind of stuff. I will defend her against my church, against whoever. It doesn't matter who you are. She's my closest connection. So I have to defend her first. That's my problem. Against my own children, I have to, because she's my closest connection. Now, if I raise them good, I don't have to do much defending. But the idea is that simple. Because God explains in this passage, his design for marriage was that two become one flesh and that nothing put them asunder. Now, for just a moment, I'm going to talk about the fact that God does allow, and I want to explain something to you. I want you to understand that God explains to them what the law is here, and it shows you what God's law and his morality, and this is Jesus telling you in the New Testament what God's laws concerning marriage are. I want you to consider what he says here. Let's pick back up in verse number 6. It says, "Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Your connection and your commitment to your wife is supposed to be so deep and so strong and so pure that God's intention is nothing other than death itself will divide that. No friends, no family, no past allegiances, nothing are supposed to divide that. God only in his law gives one exception in which a person could divorce and get married again. In his law, the exception is in the cause of fornication. I'm going to give it to you because a lot of people miss this and don't understand it. That's verse number 9. He says, "And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication." So except it be means there is an exception. That's what except means. It means the exception is this. "So except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery." Now, he says this earlier in the book of Matthew in chapter 5 from the wife's perspective. So he gives you both sides. He's saying that if a spouse, one is saying from the man, one from the woman, but he says if a spouse decides to get a divorce and they do it for any reason other than fornication, and fornication is important here as opposed to using the word adultery for a reason. Because adultery is not a fixed word. You can count it as adultery if your spouse lusts after another person in their heart. If they talk too much and get too close to somebody, you can view that as adultery. Because adultery doesn't necessarily demand that a physical act ever took place. Adultery begins in the heart and spreads out forth from that. Fornication requires, by definition, that a physical act took place. So God's even setting his law so strong as to say you can't just decide that they had too close of a relationship with somebody. It has to be a physical act, a physical betrayal of the marriage and the commitment. And he says the only exception in which he allowed in his law that somebody could get divorced and remarried, other than, of course, if your spouse dies, you can do whatever you want to. But the only exception in the law was if it was in the cause of fornication. Meaning that if you have a spouse who, once you've married them, has committed the physical act of adultery, not any other kind of adultery, then that's fornication. Because fornication, by definition, is any sexual act taking place between two people who are not married to one another. So that's adultery. That's people having sex before marriage. There's a lot of things that fall under the category of fornication. But in this case, because it's pertaining to spouses, you only can use the ones that actually pertain to spouses. And in this case, that's primarily going to be physical adultery. It's going to be the situation wherein a man's wife cheated on him or a husband cheated on his wife or something of that nature. And he says in that case, the law allowed that someone could put away their spouse and could remarry on those grounds. And the logic, the answer is not because God wants it or because it's God's desire, but because God acknowledged that the heart of man is too hard. That sometimes there are some people who won't turn from their sin, and sometimes there are people who just cannot forgive. But because of the hardness of the heart, not every time is God's plan going to be perfectly honored. Now, if we're going to be honest, in any divorce, any situation where somebody's been cheated on and they're looking to get a divorce, the actual most spiritual answer is going to be to stick with that person, count your life a living sacrifice, and be willing to, okay, we just won't have kids, we just do whatever, and I'll just stick with this person, give them a chance, like a Hosea and Gomer kind of situation where they already had kids, but he's willing to just suffer and put up with her and give her a chance and so forth. That's the most spiritual answer, and you see that. That is God's design throughout the Bible. So that Matthew 19:6, we read, verse 7 and 8, it says, "They say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." He said the reason why God, when he gave the commandment in the garden, didn't say, Adam, if she finds somebody else, I don't know where she'll find him, but if she finds somebody else and she has an affair, you can put her away, is because God never intended that. Malachi tells you that God hates putting away. He hates divorce. So it's never God's desire nor plan. but God does allow for it. And there is the one scenario, the one exception, wherein because of the hardness of the heart, somebody chooses to go that direction. But the thing is, while there's the exception, while there's that possibility, the heart of anyone who is married or going into a marriage should always be that God hates divorce, and it's not something I ever consider an option. Now, there are people, I've held people's hands as they've got divorced because of the fact that, and I'm not trying to pick on or embarrass anybody when I talk about that, but because they went through a situation where their spouse not only cheated on them, but it said, I will continue to do so. I've seen people go through some pretty rough stuff. And I've seen situations where it's the hardness that the person couldn't forgive. I've seen where it's the hardness that the spouse literally is not willing to quit. They're going to continue. They've promised that they will continue to do this because they don't care. I've seen these things. And so I know something. Yes, there's an exception. Yes, there's a time and place where God allows. But it should never be anybody's intention, nor heart, nor desire when going into a marriage, nor while in the marriage. It should always be that while it is even remotely possible, you reconcile and you do whatever you can to fix a marriage. Now, again, the most spiritual option would be to count your life a sacrifice, but that's not always what people are going to do. And at the end of the day, when it comes to something like this, you get to a place where it becomes the decision of the individual. What you're left with is this. When you're in a marriage, that commitment should be that your own heart doesn't even come between you and your spouse. If you have been someone who your spouse has cheated on you, there should be within your desire and within you a willingness so that when it comes to that spouse, your own heart and that own hardness and that feeling of betrayal and that pride and those things that would make you say, I don't know if I can ever look at them the same. I don't know if I could ever forgive them, that even that doesn't come between you and that spouse because you've become one flesh. And you do stuff all the time where you're not sure if you can look at yourself in the mirror again, but you find a way to do it. Because you are one flesh. You have to find ways to overcome. And so I'm saying, biblically, there's an exception. I don't want anybody to get me wrong on all of that. I understand that. There is the exception. But the desire of anyone who's getting married and what a marriage should be when somebody's going into it is that divorce is not a word. It's not on the table. It's not an option. Putting away is not a choice. It's not something I want to do. Because the desire should be that to become one flesh, nothing puts that asunder. Let no man put that asunder. Now, one of the ways you can help protect your marriage from ever getting there is put your spouse first. I mean, after God, put them first. When we start letting other things, our jobs, our responsibilities, our family, our friends, whatever baggage we bring to the table get in the way, then at some point we start letting a room come into our marriage to make that division, to put asunder. You start peeling off that which is supposed to be cleaving unto you. The best thing you can do is just cling to your wife like a garment that's been rained on all day and stuck to your skin. Cling to your husband, cling to your wife just like that. Cling unto them as if you're one flesh and you have to stay together no matter what. That's the intention God has for marriage. Now, he tells you why he allowed the exception, because of the hardness of the heart. He tells you it exists. He tells you all these things. You cannot ignore it. Someone who wants to fight and argue and hurt somebody or belittle somebody who's been through a divorce and doesn't understand that has no right even entering into the conversation, because God does say that. And for me, for example, to tell someone whose wife has cheated on them or their husband that you have to stay together, you're not allowed, would mean that you're asking me to go above what God's own law was willing to go. God in his law was not willing to impose that upon somebody. So how can I ask more of somebody than what God's law was willing to ask of them? So my point is, there is a time, there is a place, but it should never be the option. It should never be. It's one of those things is there's no backup plan that this should be a part of. This should be erased from your vocabulary, and only at the last possible second when you realize it should it be. I mean, if you found out today that you had in your arm an infection and you're going to cut off your whole arm, you're going to try everything possible before you agree to let that be put asunder from you, to be cut off. You're going to do everything in your power. You're going to make every sacrifice, and it's only when keeping the arm means losing the whole body. It means dying. That's when you're finally going to say, okay, you can take it. That's what a normal human being does. That's what anybody's going to do, is when the infection gets spread so much that it just cannot be treated, that's when you say, okay, you can go ahead and take it. But normally you would fight to almost the point of death to not let go. That's the commitment that should be brought into a marriage, so that when somebody comes in, they're willing to commit to that person and love them for the rest of their life. Let me say one thing as I close about love. Many people, when they think about love, because I talked about love quite a bit last week, They think of love as being this idea of those feelings you have when you first come in a relationship, that excitement that comes with the relationship, and that early connection you feel. If that's what you think love is, then you are a puppy. You are a puppy, and we call that puppy love, meaning that you have not actually grown up or matured enough to know what real love looks like. Love is when you, having spent time with somebody, usually it takes a matter of years to reach this point in a relationship. When having spent time with somebody and seen what they look like in the morning, seeing what they act like when they don't feel good, seeing them at their worst and at their best and all these kind of things, and yet you're still willing to commit your life to them and be with them, that's what love is. In fact, I can honestly say that in terms of like romance and passion and all those things, sure. I mean, when we were first married, my wife and I would have been more romantic, more passionate in many ways than what we would be today. But I can honestly say that what I thought was love when I told her I loved her doesn't compare to what I feel to her today. Because love is something that has to mature, it has to grow, and it's not those early romantic feelings, those passions and stuff you feel. It's that connection. It's getting to the point with that person where it's not just that you can't live without them, but that your life is having that person around. It's that commitment to them so that they become so intrinsically linked to your life that you are one flesh. That's what the love of a marriage is. It's not that every time you see them, you're filled with lust and passion. It's that your life is missing when they're not there. There's just something not right when they're not around. My wife doesn't understand because she doesn't love me the same way I love her. But no, my wife doesn't understand this because she wants to get away from me. I don't want to go away from her. Maybe it's because she also has to put up with the kids where I go to my office and work. That may actually be the real issue here. But she doesn't understand half the time when she says she wants to go somewhere. And for me, it's like, well, no, I don't want you to go away from it. She wants to fly here, go there. She's always looking for an excuse. Anytime my mom wants to come over to visit, she starts, I think I need to go to Romania. I need this to get done. She says she doesn't, but 2 times in a row, she's said that as soon as she heard my mom was coming to visit. But I don't understand it. I don't feel that way. I'm happy. You know, if we're together every day for the rest of our lives, I'm okay with that. Doesn't mean I want to be with her every second of every day. There's times where I need a moment's peace. But if I'm with her every day for the rest of my life, I'm fine with that. I'm happy with that. That's life to me. When she's missing, when they decide to go away, when I'm recording a live stream or something and they're gone for several hours, my house is empty. Not just in the literal sense, but there's an emptiness, a feeling of emptiness to me. You can feel it because my life is having them around. Because when it comes to her or my children, my love for my children is not just that moment of joy that you feel when you first see them. And, you know, they're ugly as when they're first born, but you see them and it's just so exciting. And you have that. That's not what the real love is. That's just the stirring of your emotions. It's that commitment that even when they start to grow up and they start to be a little bit annoying, but they're cuter, they're just more annoying. That even when they get there and you still just want to have them around, you like having them around you, you enjoy being there. You like to sacrifice for them. You like to do things for them. That's when you start to see what love is. I'm not even saying that's specifically what love is, but I'm saying until you reach that point to where you don't define your love based off of the passion and the things like that you feel, but off of the connection and the commitment you feel, you have not begun to understand what love is. And I'm going to tell you, until you reach that point in a marriage, you've not reached a place where you understand really what it means to cleave to that person because you're still fueled by passion and lust and those kind of things. It's when you get to the place where you're just in it with this person for the long haul, you're committed. That's when you really start to understand what it means to love them. Father, we thank you and praise you, God, for what you do. We thank you, Lord, for your blessings and your goodness. I pray, God, you'd help us just to be faithful unto you in all things. I pray, God, you'd help us, Lord, those who are married, those who would ever look to be married, to make the right decisions, Lord, to be committed in the right ways, to not let things come in the way of the marriage. We thank you, Lord, for what you do, and we ask all these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I thank you for being here. I look forward to next week. Again, reminding you, of course, the wedding Saturday, Brother Morgan preaching in the morning and in the afternoon. Make sure you're here for that. Come to the baptism. If you're somebody who needs to be baptized or you have questions about baptism, please talk with me so I can help you. But take some time to fellowship before you go. You can go ahead and be dismissed.